We have just a short agenda or agenda for the day. First, we're going to cover what an electric bike is, especially how it relates compared to a regular bicycle. We'll talk about the benefits and challenges of having an e-bike and using it as a day-to-day vehicle or even just occasionally. We'll have some tips for first-time buyers. We'll talk about the e-bike rebate program that I'm sure there'll be some questions about. That's brand new to the state of Minnesota after this recent legislative session. We'll talk about some expectations you can have when owning an electric bike, some tips I have from personal experience and maintenance, and then just some information about what kind of gear, accessories, information about riding in the winter with the snow. Our Minnesota winter is right around the corner, and then a little info about how you can kind of get the most out of your e-bike as you travel throughout the Twin Cities region. First, a little bit about my program here at Anoka County. My name is Noah Hansen. I am the primary coordinator for our Anoka County Commute Solutions program. We're a program of Anoka County's transit office, and we're funded federally through CMAQ funds, which are congestion mitigation and air quality. We work to encourage biking, walking, carpooling, van pooling, taking transit, whether that's the bus or North Star or Transit Link to get around. We provide our expertise, resources, and support to commuters in Anoka County and the region. We provide complimentary transit resources and consulting services to organizations in Anoka County. So if you represent a business or you have an employer or you're a manager or you property manager in an apartment building or you live in a senior living facility, kind of anywhere, any kind of organization in the county, we can provide free services to, including auditing your site, doing presentations like this one, etc. And overall, our goals are to decrease traffic congestion in Anoka County and the region, improve air quality, and create a better quality of life in Anoka County and the region. And just a little bit about me. I'm relatively new to the program here at Anoka County. I've been here for about 6 months now, but previously I did this same kind of work in the Washington, D.C. area. I'm very excited to be sharing kind of my experience and knowledge. And then, for the context of this presentation, I've actually owned an electric bike of my own for the last 3 years. And while I lived in DC, used it to commute every single day. So I do have some experience on that side of things. So always happy to share, and I've gotten a lot of questions about e-bikes over the course of my career so far. So we'll go ahead and jump right in. So what is an electric bike? Pretty plainly, an e-bike is a bicycle with an electric motor and a battery. Either they'll have e-assist, which means there's usually a motor that will engage only when you're pedaling and will provide some assistance. It essentially increases the torque that you have and allows you to go faster with less energy way quicker. But some of them also just have a dedicated throttle where you just push it like you would with a car or a motorcycle, scooter, what have you. There are 3 consumer class models that you look for when you're buying one, when you go to your bike shop or whatnot. The class 1s, they top out at 20 miles an hour. They always have pedal assist and they have a throttle, but it only works while you're pedaling. Class 2 is very similar, but it has a throttle you can use whenever you want, and it may or may not have the pedal assist. And then finally, class 3 goes up to 28 miles an hour as pedal assist, and sometimes they have throttles. I have a class 3 e-bike, a specialized Como, and it goes pretty fast. And I'm actually kind of happy I don't have the throttle because it helps you kind of feel more in control of what you've got going on your bike. One update to the laws of around bikes and e-bikes in the state of Minnesota that's changed in the last couple of years is that now all 3 classes of e-bikes are permitted anywhere bikes are permitted in Minnesota unless they are explicitly disallowed by a park system or whatnot. So anywhere a bike can go, you can go on an e-bike, but that also means anywhere a bike can't go, you're also not supposed to go. That includes sidewalks in major central business district areas, among a few other things. And there are several types of e-bikes. So we've got folding e-bikes, there are upright ones, mountain ones. If you're, kind of adventuring, there's cargo for getting around town, trikes, long tail, you kind of name it. There are all sorts of different options and types of e-bikes out there. And I just am highlighting a few of the different kinds so you can really see where how diverse the offerings right now on the market are for e-bikes. So on here, in the top left corner is a folding bike from Lectric, which is a pretty popular consumer brand. At the very top, you see the Lime and the Vio bikes, which you can no longer find on the streets for the rest of the year. But starting up in the spring again, you will be able to find them again. But if you're itching to try an e-bike or you're in downtown on the weekend and you want to zip around real quick, these are available for rental on the street and just unlock it with your phone. And they're pretty great. And that's in Minneapolis for the most part. The top right is actually my electric bike loaded up with all sorts of stuff I had for an outreach event I did. And as you can see, I can haul quite a few things on the e-bike, and that includes also having my own backpack and whatnot. And then we have got some few others. I think a couple I wanted to highlight is in the lower left, we have kind of the Cadillac of e-bikes, especially for cargo bikes, the Urban Arrow, which you'll see around town. Folks used to take their kids to school, a little less so in Anoka County, but they're definitely getting more and more popular. And then next to that is a trike, which we'll talk a little bit about e-trikes a bit, but there is a growing community and popularity over using these in climates where there's snow and ice, because you get a little more balance. You don't have to worry about toppling over if you spin a little bit, whatnot. So and they have cargo advantages as well. And then on the far right, I wanted to just point out this is a cargo bike I actually used when I was working for the DC government in DC. And as you can see, I was able to fit a full-size double folding table in the back amongst all my other outreach stuff, and was still able to go, the 3 or 4 miles I was able to get there from the headquarters. So you can really do a lot with electric bikes. There's communities on the internet where people are having competitions for how big of a couch you can haul on the back of it and whatnot, which obviously it's not the most normal use case for everybody, but just kind of demonstrating that e-bikes are extremely versatile vehicles that can really achieve supplementing or replacing cars or trucks for a lot more things than you would really think. So some benefits to e-bikes that I think is important to keep in mind, or why you maybe would want to consider getting one for yourself or someone in your family. You get a more accommodating commute. It takes a lot less work to ride a bike, especially if your commute has hills. You're going to be going faster. You're going to be going go faster with less work and less sweat. It's really a lovely time, especially if you got a relatively short commute in town. You can make longer trips across greater distances, which I think is also really powerful, especially in the Twin Cities region. As I kind of alluded to, I think that they're most useful for supplementing or replacing local car trips. Most car trips that are done in the United States are usually under a couple of miles. And if you can, make changes here and there, you'll save money on gas, you'll save money on wear and tear on your car. You'll be out and about, talking to people, riding your bike, seeing the world. And if you're not going very far, you'll notice it really doesn't, take a whole lot of time off of what you would have done if you were just driving. One thing I really like about it is it's lifelong cycling. So for seniors or folks with mobility issues, e-bikes can be really empowering as a way to continue cycling and a hobby that a lot of people are able to take advantage of. And this allows you to kind of keep doing it even in your later years. For instance, my grandfather's in his 80s and he uses an electric bike, granted on a very slight assist level, but is still able to continue biking, which I think is pretty incredible. I mentioned it earlier and I just kind of skipped over it, but there are a lot of e-bikes that are focused on cargo and transportation, and you'll notice that when you've got that e-assist, you can fill it up with plywood or whatnot, and it's not really going to slow you down. I find that I still even go, at 16, 15 miles an hour, that my trips will still be faster than they would have been on a normal bike, although I'm kind of a big guy, so that is part of it. And then I think, as I mentioned with the classes, you can take advantage of existing bike infrastructure. We have a lot of great regional trails in Anoka County, specifically ones that connect to the Mississippi River Regional Trail, which is a massive trail that runs along the Mississippi River, connects both downtowns It's a little disjointed when you go between Fridley and Minneapolis, but in general, it's a great, there are pretty significant amount of people who use the corridor to commute, whether they're just moving around the county or they're going to Minneapolis or St. Paul, whatnot. But you can get pretty far using grade separated, almost bike highways almost. Um, the Twin Cities region is very spread out. We're one of the most spread out, low dense regions in the country, which makes e-bikes a really interesting and viable alternative, I think, for personal transportation because it is time competitive. You can get across great distances pretty fast. And certainly here in Anoka County, especially in the southern part of the county where the majority of residents live, we have a pretty significant network of off-road cycle tracks or multi-use paths that are adjacent to most arterial roads. So places you would be going by car, you can probably also get to by bike. You just kind of have to be careful at crossings, intersections, all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of benefits, and there's way more than this. All the benefits of biking also apply here. There's evidence that people, and there have been studies done that e-bike owners actually ride their bike more often than people who more often and for farther distances than people who ride traditional bicycles only. And so there's quite a few benefits. But as someone who's owned an e-bike for 3 years, or so, I can also tell you that there are some drawbacks and challenges to being an e-bike owner, especially if you're using it quite a bit. Cost can be a big barrier to entry. E-bikes are not cheap. And if they are cheap, I probably don't recommend buying it, is kind of my personal recommendations. We don't make any recommendations about specific brands or vendors in this presentation. Although if you have any questions, you can feel free to reach out. User safety, this is obviously, and also for the safety of others around you. You're going faster, it's still a bicycle. You have to be really mindful of how you are using the bike, only travel at speeds you're comfortable with. Repair and replacement costs can be a little higher than on a traditional bike, especially if you're going, for me, I was only a very casual bicyclist before I got an e-bike. And I was kind of surprised at what I was spending to replace some of the consumables on the bike. These are your brakes, your chains, your derailleur, kind of everything on your bike that makes your bike move. But you also have the electric bike parts like your motor, your battery, and specifically, especially if you're someone who is interested in getting a new battery or a bigger battery, they're not necessarily standardized across the industry. I have a Specialized, and I can't necessarily take it off the shelf other kind of e-bike brand to replace it. And in the case of my bike, it's also the most expensive part on the bike. So it is something to be mindful. You don't want to cheap out on your battery. It's a big deal, which kind of leads me to the next one, which is that storage can be challenging. If you live in an apartment building or a residential complex, there aren't really a whole lot of regulations yet on how buildings are built to house e-bikes. Lithium-ion batteries can be pretty dangerous. And it's a realistic risk of having an e-bike that I think is important for you to know about. One of the ways you can circumvent it is UL, the International Standardizing Organization. It does have an e-bike standard that's used far more in Europe, but more and more e-bike manufacturers like Rad Power Bikes, Aventon, they're looking at standardizing their bikes to also have that UL certification. So yeah, you want to think about that. I leave my bike outside, but I bring the battery inside. I usually do that kind of wherever I am. It just, the batteries also can degrade with, extreme weather, etc. And if you buy an e-bike, this will all be in your manual, or you can ask your bike shop about it. Inclement weather, not all bikes are created equal. E-bikes go pretty fast. So I found that in rain and wet conditions, you really do need to be mindful. But I think these are, a lot of these are kind of common sense. But I think in Minnesota, especially with our, very drastic winters and sometimes calmer summers and falls and whatnot, the weather can change at the drop of a hat, and it's good to keep that in mind, especially with, you're shelling out a significant amount of money for an electric bike. And nearly all of the same challenges that you would have during when you ride a traditional bicycle, those will also exist for e-bikes. Whether that's theft or safety on the road from cars, trucks, other road users, and accommodations. So that's bike racks, parking at places, you're in the same boat as bicycle, as someone who's riding a traditional bicycle. And of course, these aren't all of them either. Every e-bike is different. Different e-bike brands have different, quirks to them. So it's yeah, those are some of the challenges. But for first-time buyers, I think this is really, to me, this is one of the most important slides on this presentation, because I think it's really important that people like me and or programs like mine who are promoting people use e-bikes as a form of alternative transportation, that you are informed about kind of what the market looks like, and so you don't get burned. The first and most important thing I, can say from experience is try before you buy. If the retailer is not going to let you try the electric bike, I probably wouldn't buy it. You want to make sure you feel comfortable on it. You want to make sure you feel safe. You want to make sure that the retailer is reputable. And pretty much all reputable retailers will allow you to do a test ride. Now, this might change in the winter when conditions are different, but certainly if you're buying something in the spring or right now before the ground is covered in snow, salt, and ice, you should be able to try a bike. Which leads me to the other point, which is that you should always know somewhere that will service your bike. Even though my e-bike is a Specialized, which is one of the largest brands in the country, if not the world, for kind of boutique bicycles, I've had a handful of bike shops in the Twin Cities and elsewhere decline to work on my bike because it's an e-bike. So you want to make sure basically the recommendation is that you should buy it from a place that's going to service it, especially if you're not handy or you don't have experience working on bikes, and especially if you don't have experience working on e-bikes or electronics. You want to be careful. These batteries are big. You do not want to mess with what you're doing. I treat mine like an Italian sports car. I'm going to take it to the shop. They're going to work on it. And that would be the same, no matter what kind of model I had. Be wary of cheap e-bikes online. You do get what you pay for. If you go on Amazon or AliExpress, etc., you're going to see bikes that are $300, $500, $800. And if it looks like a good deal and you seem a little skeptical, you should definitely take that to heart. I think my biggest recommendation is to just avoid buying any of these cheap folding e-bikes that's not from a brand that you can get it fixed somewhere. I generally avoid buying e-bikes online just in general, but I think it's really important to talk about this because you will be buying from manufacturers who might not use standardized parts. So getting parts from your bike shop going to be doing repairs may be difficult. They may not be using e-bike grade parts. You may be essentially riding an electric bike that has the same braking system or gearing system as a regular bike, which they shouldn't. Especially not if you're buying one brand new on your own. So be really careful. It's a big investment, and don't let this become e-waste. There's a big problem with e-waste, especially in this space right now. You kind of see as cities are adopting e-bike systems that you always hear about. A whole fleet of e-bikes has been dumped in the ocean or whatever, which is obviously not what would happen to you as an individual, but you want to make sure you have a battery that is going to last you. You want to make sure you have a motor that you can get replaced. This is not, you should not be replacing your e-bike every year or two, which I've read stories and heard from people who have the $500 bikes who do that. And while it may be on a more affordable end, it's very wasteful. And I think it's only going to get more expensive as lithium-ion batteries continue to be they haven't truly adjusted anything. So yeah, identify storage and possible transportation for the e-bike. This is something I have struggled with. Things happen, and especially somewhere like Anoka County where things may be spread out. You may be somewhere where you aren't, next to a business where you can, talk to someone, or near your home. You may be, especially because e-bikes go great distances. You might be in downtown Minneapolis with your e-bike and something goes wrong. It's good to think about how you're going to get your e-bike back and forth. You definitely don't need to own a car to do it. When I used my e-bike primarily to commute every day, I actually didn't have a car at the time. And I was lucky enough to have a bike shop that would, actually take the e-bike with they had a truck they would pick it up on, or I would take it on the train in the same way that I would, I live in Minneapolis now. Um, but in Anoka County, you don't necessarily have that luxury. So definitely keep in mind, it's good to give people a heads up that if you're out and about, especially if the weather's kind of bad or you're going somewhere you've never been before. Um, but having a rack for your car, or if you have one, or a backup plan of a friend, I think is really important. And then some insurance companies for electric bikes will actually have different options for you if you have a roadside breakdown, including maybe giving you a ride to a bus stop or a train station. Um, but that's not always ideal, especially in Minnesota weather, in a very spread out part of the region. So it's good to know. And on top of that, where you're going to store it. Some apartment buildings don't allow you to store them indoors. Bike rooms can be great. They can also, have risks. I've heard of people who've had things stolen out of bike rooms in apartment buildings. So you just kind of have to be mindful of the risk you have, wherever you're storing it. But if you have a garage at home and you're in Anoka County, especially out in Andover, Ramsey, Coon Rapids, your garage, you should be fine. I do recommend, of course, though, if you have a removable battery, bringing it out and then always charging it inside and in kind of room temperature and not exposing it to extremes. Um, the budgets, as this kind of outlines, it can be anywhere as little as $300 to $500 to I saw an e-bike today, a listing for $17,000. Um, so definitely know what you're going to be spending when you are starting to look. I would say a pretty good budget that you can get a decent e-bike these days is that $1,000 to $2,500 mark. I mentioned a couple of the different kinds of brands that are out there these days. Rad Power Bikes, Aventon, um, REI, the sports outfitter, has their own in-house brand of e-bikes that they will service at their stores. And all of these are kind of within that mid-range. So it's definitely doable. You don't have to spend, $5,000 to $6,000 on an electric bike. You do not need to import an Urban Arrow to take all your kids to school. Lots of people can make it work with a budget, especially if you're just going to and from work every once in a while, or trying to replace and supplement car trips around town, like getting groceries. And then I was hesitant to even mention this at all, but there are DIY e-bikes. There's a pretty active online community for this. And it can be cheaper. You can get a pretty big battery, but I wouldn't recommend it. It's mostly for enthusiasts, and DIY e-bikes may also violate laws, depending on, if you bought one secondhand off Facebook Marketplace or something. It might not be actually legal to ride it on off roads. It might go too fast. It might actually need a motorcycle license. So probably don't, go down that road unless you know what you're doing, or have done it before. And kind of along with this, we have a really great program coming to Minnesota starting next July, a brand new e-bike rebate program. It was approved in the 2023 legislative session by the House and Senate, and Governor Walz signed it into law earlier this year. And it will provide income-based rebate certificates up to $1,500 for applicants purchasing a new electric bike from an approved retailer. So they haven't quite outlined exactly what the process of application is going to be, although Bike MN, the Bicycle Alliance of Minnesota, has some really good resources, which I've got the QR code on there if you'd like to scan it, or you can just go to their website. They've got a whole bunch of information about it. But there's not exactly a timeline on when the applications will be out. The one thing that has been pretty clear is that you will need to apply before you buy the e-bike. So it's a good idea to get that application, and then you'll kind of know how much your rebate is going to be good for relative to what your budget is for your bike. And for now, it's a relatively small pot. It's limited to $2 million in rebates, which it's a good start. But that said, a lot of other places in the country have started doing this. The city of Denver, Seattle, have done these, and they've sold out, almost instantly. So I foresee this being a very popular program. So if you are interested in taking advantage of it, definitely try to get in on the ground level. But the program and the rebates will begin in July 2024. So some ownership expectations, just kind of more observations I have from being an e-bike owner who wasn't previously a, avid cyclist, as people like to say. Regular maintenance is an absolute must for longevity. I cannot overstate this enough. Make sure if you are noticing weird things about your bike, you should go get them checked out before things get bad. I think a removable battery is a must. That is my opinion. There are lots of bikes that don't have removable batteries, but I would say there are probably more e-bikes that have removable batteries than don't. It's just to me it makes sense. It can be unsafe to leave it outside in cold or extreme heat. It makes it easier to steal your e-bike. It makes it a lot more valuable to steal if the battery's right there. And also, I like to have an eye on my battery because they're expensive. It's a big investment. And without it, your e-bike is just a regular bike. Um, be a courteous road, trail, and sidewalk user. E-bikes are still relatively new to the world, and especially the region and the parks, and as you may have noticed in Anoka County, I see people on e-bikes almost every single day on the various trails around my office in Andover, and um, they're still relatively new. But I still probably see more traditional cyclists. So don't be zipping past people at 30 miles an hour. You know, be courteous, know your hand signals, have a bell, all that good stuff, and know your laws because it can be important. And just try to be courteous, be respectful in the same way that you would want others to be to you. Um, I think being predictable is really important, especially on an electric bike. I don't know that in Anoka County there are too many places where you would run into the kind of mixed traffic where I think you'd run in, you're not going to be running into, some really dense city traffic, but in some places like Anoka and Fridley, Columbia Heights, there are some areas where, things are pretty dense and you want to be predictable. So use your hand signals, know what you're doing, use your lights, and don't, make rapid decisions at the last second, especially if you're in the middle of the street with a bunch of other cars. Bike only at speeds you are comfortable with. I think this is also, obviously a bit of a no-brainer, but there have been some high-profile e-bike accidents. Particularly Simon Cowell and Arnold Schwarzenegger have both found that they went a little too fast on their e-bikes. And so you got to be careful, depending on your age, your mobility level, your balance, and also kind of the road conditions, the weather, etc. Be careful, be mindful. It can be tempting to gun it all the time. I know that, especially when I've been commuting. I like e-bikes because they're fast and they get you where you need to go quickly. But you got to be careful. And then having a backup transportation is always great, especially if you're using your e-bike to regularly commute. So if you're a two-car household who's looking to cut down to one, or you live somewhere near bus or transit like the North Star, it's good to have a backup just in case something goes wrong. If your e-bike, you're commuting to Minneapolis, for example, and your e-bike breaks down in downtown, and like our imaginary example before, you're not going to want to be stuck in downtown. You're going to want to know what your backup options are. And I think this is also just a good idea for all kinds of alternative transportation. And I kind of like actually knowing that because you learn kind of how dynamic the area around you is and what your options are, and you feel like you're more a part of your city and community. And so here in Anoka County, I definitely recommend, like I said, if you're going places you don't know, you haven't been before, or a really long ride, definitely give someone a heads up and consider, that if there's any situation where you might need a backup, especially when inclement weather is a thing. It's definitely something to keep in mind. And I will say, one thing on that, e-bikes count as one of the alternative forms of transportation you can use to sign up for the Guaranteed Ride Home program, which is a program managed primarily by the Met Council Metro Transit. And it's a database on the Met Council's website that basically allows you to say, I'm commuting by such and such way, that's not driving alone. And they will I don't remember the exact number off the top of my head at the moment, but they will reimburse you for a certain number. I believe it's 5 now, it might be 6, rides over the course of a calendar year, in a situation where you need to get back to wherever you're going, very quickly, or maybe your bike breaks down, or you missed the last bus or train. And so e-bikes will also allow you to take advantage of that program. Some basic maintenance tips. I'm definitely not a bike mechanic, so these are just kind of generals, but also lessons I've learned as an e-bike owner. Basic maintenance skills is a massive plus. I definitely recommend checking out classes or programming that's a lot of civic area cities and nonprofits offer different kinds of classes on basic bike maintenance. Knowing how to lube your chain, knowing how to replace your bike tubes. All of these things are great skills to know how to have if you're going to be a regular bicyclist. Register your e-bike's warranty. I can't emphasize this enough. I've had to warranty out a motor before, and it would not have been very fun if I hadn't had the warranty. So definitely make sure you're doing that. And follow your bike shop or manufacturer's guidance on regular maintenance for your e-bike, especially if you're someone who's not handy or not familiar with maintaining bikes in general. It's best to err on the side of caution when it comes to maintenance on your bike. Don't wait for a critical failure to get service. This is something that I've had the misfortune of happening before. My motor had been making weird issues, and I waited until I was smelling burning before I took it to the bike shop when they said they warrantied it out. So don't wait for that. If things seem weird, go get it checked out. If you bike fast and you frequently stop and you ride up hills, or go down a lot of hills, you are going to have a lot more maintenance when it comes to braking, your brake systems, your gearing, etc. So it's just something to keep in mind that if you're biking fast, you're stopping hard, you're going to go through parts a lot faster. And if you're aiming to replace all or most of your car trips, it's good to have some money set aside for unplanned maintenance or repairs. I would also say this is good advice if you are a car owner, because car repairs are very expensive, but bike repairs can also be very expensive. Especially depends on the model you have or what you need to do with it. So I always, like to have a little bit of money on hand, just in case something were to happen, especially if it's your main form of transportation. But here in Anoka County, I imagine most folks probably aren't using it every single day all the time to get everywhere. Although I have met people in Anoka County who do that, and I'm very impressed by that. So yeah, just keeping that in mind. And then just, especially because this is a first time buyer's guide or people who are maybe new to biking or e-biking, just some things that I have found, useful. Having some rear and front racks for additional storage and cargo, I think is really beneficial. It helps you get the most out of what you want for your e-bike. You can also get seats for children, other riders. Some e-bikes are even rated, they're rated for 2 full adults. In some cases. So there are a lot of options for customizing in that respect. I think pannier bags and baskets are really beneficial and kind of go along with the last one where you just get more cargo. Having a lights, horn, bell, and integrated computer are all things that I think, especially the lights, horn, and bell, are a must-have. I actually have a horn on my bike that is literally a car horn, primarily because when I lived, in DC, I was doing mostly in town, non-bike lane, mixed traffic biking. But it's good to make sure you have ways that you can communicate with others, and in a lot of cases, especially when you're riding at night, even there are legal requirements around having lights on your bike as well. Reflective clothing and accessories for being brighter, I think, are always helpful, especially if you're riding early in the morning or at night. These days, it stays pretty dark in the morning, and it's only going to, stay darker until the solstice. And then it gets dark early. So if you're a commuter around those hours, it's definitely recommended that you have something to make you seem a little more visible. Other things, a helmet is obviously recommended. There are helmets that are rated for faster speed crashes for e-bikes that you may be interested in looking at. So definitely check out what your bike store has when you're going to go check out e-bikes. Mirror is nice, especially in mixed traffic. And then a gator mask or balaclava to cover your face, especially in the winter, is great. And then the last one is insurance. It's not the first thing you think of when you think of a bicycle, but there are insurance companies that specialize in bikes, and they will insure e-bikes as well. E-bikes are usually covered a little bit under renters or homeowners insurance, but not always. And you might not get the full value of your e-bike. I've heard stories of folks who were only given a couple $100 because they hadn't, gone through the process of declaring the full value, whatnot. So I recommend going through a company that specially works with bike insurance. And the insurance I use, I particularly like because it has full, like no questions asked, theft coverage for the complete value of the money I've put into the bike, which includes upgrades you may have made. And I think that gives me a lot of peace of mind when I'm riding my bike around about leaving it outside while going shopping, all that kind of stuff. And they have liability, and then as I mentioned earlier, a roadside assistance, I think is also something you can take advantage of that some people might find really beneficial. A little more information about winter riding because it's right around the corner, and part of the promotion for this event was that there are going to be a lot of deals on e-bikes the next week or two. And if you're planning on getting out there right away, it's good to know how your e-bike might handle. Not all e-bikes are created equal when it comes to inclement weather. You want to make sure that you're not riding a bike that's meant only to be on dry surfaces. Definitely do your research about the use cases for e-bikes. Your tire size and your pressure matter. A fat tire bike at 10 psi will offer you better traction than almost any other bike. So something to think about, especially if you're riding on days where the multi-use paths might be covered in snow, or you're going across town, or you're going through downtown Anoka and you're along some of those streets. It's good to keep in mind that how you can make it a little safer for you. Definitely recommend using low e-assist or limited throttle usage. Accelerating slowly is tougher on a bike than it is with like a car, because you don't necessarily get that grip as quickly as you do. Well, if you have the fat tire bike, you'll get that benefit. But if you're using your traditional e-bike that you use year round, you might run into some slipping issues, or if you're accelerating too quickly. Road and trail conditions can be unpredictable. They're not always tracked and reported on at the same rate as trunk highways or interstates. So definitely know that if you're going on a day when you don't know if things have been plowed, you might not want to test it. Have a backup plan. That kind of is something I've mentioned a handful of times. It's always good to have a backup plan. Dress for the weather. Fresh snow is the easiest to bike on, which is, I think, a fun fact that you might not know about winter biking, but it's something to keep in mind. If you're like, oh, it's beautiful, it's a nice 32-degree snowy day, that might be the right day to go take advantage of doing some winter biking rather than the -20, everything froze overnight kind of weather. And be patient. Make safety your top priority. We want to make sure you're safe. Biking should be a fun hobby and a safe hobby for everyone who does it. That's my personal belief. And there's a lot of things you can do to make riding an electric bike very unsafe, but there's also a lot of ways as a responsible user and a responsible rider that you can, keep yourself safe, keep others safe, and get home, because that's really what it's all about. On my last slide, just because I wanted to talk about this because it's something I'm very excited about. As I mentioned, I live in Minneapolis. I work in Andover. Metro Transit has begun allowing electric bikes for use on buses and trains, including on the North Star. Before, there was some vague language that seemed to exclude e-bikes explicitly from being brought, but as long as it can fit in the racks on the front of the buses, or isn't totally in the way on a light rail car or a North Star, you should be good. Although North Star trains have dedicated bike parking in each car. So I think this is a really powerful change to this policy, especially for Anoka County, because you can use your e-bike for last mile commuting. I work about 4 miles from the closest North Star station, but 4 miles on an electric bike when you're going 25 miles an hour, that's really not that bad. It's almost time competitive with driving. And and especially if you're not reverse commuting, you'll find that you can do a lot more for your last few miles of commuting without having to get on another bus or a train or whatnot. I think that it's really powerful, especially if you take like the North Star. The North Star drops you off in the North Loop over by Target Field, but if you work, on the whole other side of downtown, it might still take you another 15 minutes to get there, if you took the train. But if you're on an e-bike, it's probably only going to take you a few minutes. It's like having a car that isn't a car. It's cheaper than a car. It's more nimble than a car, and it's allowed in more places than a car. So it's a good thing to think about, especially if you have to do urban cycling, or you're someone who's like, I want to do delivery in Fridley or Columbia Heights or Coon Rapids. Something to think about. And like I said, you access destinations that are otherwise inaccessible. One thing to note, though, e-bikes are not permitted inside Metro Transit bike lockers. So if you do rent a bike locker at a North Star station or an express bus park and ride, you're not permitted to have your e-bike in there. You may be able to get away with it if you have a removable battery, because I think the battery is the main thing they're concerned about, but it's something to keep in mind if that was something you were thinking about. Oh, I can bike and park at the in my bike locker. But all the North Star stations and park and rides do have additional bike parking outside of. They typically have a rack or two that you can use. So with that, that is my my last slide.